somewhere, I don't know, in some place, maybe in a forest of Assam, and I just guess that it is there, and I say that, well, there is an elephant in that part of Assam, and then it becomes accidentally true, whatever I cognize. But then basically, whatever I say, not whatever I cognize, but actually it is accidentally true, right? So there is no causal chain between it. It will be true if only I see the elephant at that part of the country, or if I kind of infer it from its sound or whatever, right? Then only it will become a properly generated, causally generated piece of cognition, right? So now, how do I attain a piece of knowledge? That is prama, that is kind of unaccidentally true cognitions. According to the Nayayika, there are 4 means. There are 4 tools for that. We would call them epistemic tools. What are those? Pramanas: perception, pratyaksha. This is done through the indriyas, through the sense organs. And then inference, which is I infer B from A, right? I do not see B directly. I do not cognize B directly. I cognize it through some relationship it holds with A, and then finally I cognize B. This is going to be our central concern today. And then we have testimony, which is Shabda Jnana, which is precisely like what BBC, CNN, and stuff they do for us. That is basically, we trust them. We think that they're not lying, right? And it doesn't work if if my informer is a liar or my informer doesn't know the thing properly. It works only when the speaker or the informer is a trustworthy person or an apta. So then their words become Shabda Pramana for me. So it is something like knowing by being told. And then finally, analogical reasoning, analogical knowledge. For example, map, right? A map. So I know what is what, where is what kind of a thing by looking at a map. Now the map is an analogical tool because it is not the real space. It is just something, it's a picture on a paper. But then I get to know analogically about the real place by looking at a map. So these are roughly 4 pramanas in Nyaya. Now, so this is to emphasize basically the inferential knowledge. The pramana, or the instrument, the epistemic instrument for inference, according to the Nayayika, is something which we called Vyapti Jnana. The rough translation is knowledge of pervision. Pervision is Vyapti. Vyapti, if we want to present it schematically, would be something like this. Any case of having a heart is a case of having a kidney. Now look at it. It looks like this. Any case, right? Any case of X is a case of Y. Now I know it through observation. I have seen that anybody who has a heart must have a kidney through observations. So I have taken years for attaining such a piece of knowledge, but I have known this. Now when I see somebody with a heart, I would infer that that person would have a kidney, even without looking at the kidney, right, of that person. So, so that itself, that knowledge itself, a knowledge like any case of having a heart is a case of having a kidney. That knowledge itself becomes an epistemic tool for me. I keep it with me. So I go somewhere, I see somebody with a heart, and then I infer kidney, right? So that's the whole idea. Let's see how it actually works. Now, before that, we talk a bit about a real debate in our framework, in our Indian framework. So this is it's a picture of a famous debate between Adi Shankaracharya and Mandana Mishra. You see, so they are so one is the proponent, the other one is the opponent. So from my perspective, I would be the proponent, Vadi, and my opponent is Prativadi, right? And from their perspective, they're the proponent and I'm the opponent. And in this Sabha, you can see that the Madhyastha is kind of the arbitrator, the judge. So in this case, the judge is actually Mandana Mishra's wife, Ubhaya Bharati. She was a great Vidushi. So she's the Madhyastha. So finally, in this case, she decided, but in general, in a real Vitarka Sabha, in a real debate, the Madhyastha or the judge decides who has won and who has got defeated and stuff like that. Now, point is, in a real debate, mostly I would be using inferences, right? Because I cannot really show you things through ostension, right? I cannot really show you a cow and talk about it, right? I would have to infer things. I would be saying that a cow is like that since you know that a cow has these properties, right? So I would infer that something must have this property because it has that property, right? Basically, I use inferences. Now, if I make a mistake while using my inferences, my opponent should be able to tell me which mistake I made. So there must be some kind of a technical framework for detecting my mistakes, right? Basically, inferential mistakes, because in a debate, I repeat this, we need to understand that in a debate, we mostly use inferences, right? We mostly kind of talk about B through A. So then we first will see what an inference means in our framework, definitely from the Indian perspective. And then we'll see how to detect mistakes of an inference, right? So an inferential mistake or an inferential error, you call it a fallacy, is called hitva. So there are two parts of this talk. In the first part, we'll be talking about hitva. So basically inferential defects. And then we'll go to something else, something called tarka. It is difficult to translate this term, but we'll see what it is. So now, what is anumana or inference? I get to see co-occurrences of smoke and fire at different places. What do I see? I see that any case of smoke is a case of fire, right? So just try to take a highlighter or something like that. Okay, so you can see that any case of smoke is a case of fire. But I can't say that any case of fire is a case of smoke, right? Because here is fire, there is no smoke. So from this observation, so pretty much like this. Now, I can see that any case of smoke is a case of fire, but not that any case of fire is a case of smoke, because you have the red hot iron ball, which has fire without having smoke. Now this becomes then my perversion, right? Which is anything that has smoke has fire. So the general idea is any case of X is a case of Y. So that's the general, the schematic representation of it. And this is an instantiation of it, right? This is with examples. Now, my inference, the final inference, if my final inference is this hill has fire since it has smoke, then look at the technical terms, the terms of inference. What do I infer? What do I infer? Fire. So I would call it the target. We just need to understand this so that we can talk about it. We need jargons so that we can talk. So let's remember these terms. So the target is something which is being inferred. In this case, that is fire. And the reason is something. So the target is called sadhya in the language of Nyaya. And then from which I infer the target is called the reason or hetu. In this case, it is smoke. And the location where I want to kind of locate the target is my paksha or the site. In this case, the site is the hill, because look at the inference. This hill has fire since it has smoke. So something like ayang parvataha vahniman, it has fire. Dhuma, since it has got smoke. Dhuma is smoke. Now, how does it actually happen? Let's look at it. So now one sees that, so this one has smoke and fire, a kitchen, right? A mahanasa, an altar, a sacrificial altar. It has both smoke and fire. But then a red hot iron ball doesn't have any smoke. It just has fire. So this is something like what I see in the world. So I just gave 2-3 examples. It should be a lot more. So we're not getting there. After having known that any case of smoke is a case of fire, I go somewhere and see smoke, not just, little smoke, really puffy clouds of smoke, that originates somewhere and then that reaches the sky, something like that. Avichinna pravaha, right? And then I remember that anything having smoke has fire, because already I knew that. Now I remember that. It was already there. It was already there with me in my storehouse, in my cognitive storehouse, my knowledge storehouse. So that now it rises again. And then from that, I would argue that, well, so this is a case of smoke, therefore it must be a case of fire too, right? So then, yeah, as I said, now, what are the central ideas? As I said, pervasion, any case of smoke is a case of fire, which alternatively can be formulated as fire pervades smoke. We should remember that pervasion is a relation from fire to smoke. So not from smoke to fire in this case. And alternatively, we can say smoke is pervaded by fire. So these are kind of technical ways of looking at it. And then three very important ideas. One is vyapti, pervasion. One is site locatedness. You see, you cannot infer something if the reason, that is in this case, smoke, is not located in the site. You could infer fire here simply because you see the reason, which is smoke, in the site, which is the hell, right? And also, what is the final thing? The paramarsha, which is a composite kind of a knowledge. This site has the reason that is pervaded by the target. You see, in this part, you find something like site locatedness. The site has the reason, but then the reason is qualified by the pervasion of the target, right? So the reason that is pervaded by the target. So the qualification also becomes a part of this composite knowledge. What are the steps? First, this is a schematic representation, and then we will talk about examples of this. So the perception of X, then the site locatedness. This site has X, so it is not just saying X, it is seeing X as the reason of an inference, right? It is not just looking at smoke, it is looking at smoke as the reason of an inference. Now because anybody may see smoke, if that person does not know that actually smoke is pervaded by fire, no inference will take place, right? So I must see it, smoke, as a reason. Then the recollection of the pervasion happens. Any case of X is a case of Y. And then the consideration, that is, this site has X that is pervaded by Y. Therefore, this site has Y. So these are roughly the steps for inference. Now, an example of that, first you just see smoke, and then you see smoke as a reason that is located in a site. This hill has smoke. And then you remember, any case of smoke is a case of fire. So this is the main instrument. This is the epistemic instrument, the main tool. And then this is the, now I'm not talking about instrument and operation or vyapara, because that will be unnecessarily complicated, but we'll try to understand what it is. This intermediate step is very important for reaching the final step. And so this hill has smoke that is pervaded by fire. So basically, this is saying that, this is practically uniting two different pieces of knowledge. One is this hill has smoke, and any case of smoke is a case of fire, right? So it is one way of saying that. Therefore, this hill has fire. Now, the inferential claims, whenever somebody inferentially claims S as T, since S has R, what do they claim? What are the claims actually they make? They make basically three claims. One, S as T, that's the main claim. We call it inference or anumiti. Second is S as R, which is S as the reason also, on the basis of which I infer, like smoke is there in the hell. So this is called site locatedness or pakshadharmata. And also, it is possible simply because just by saying that S has T since S has R, you are saying that you do not begin here, you begin here. You are basically saying that any case of R is a case of T. You are not claiming any case of T is a case of R. We should be very careful as far as this is concerned, because this is actually a one-way traffic. This is not a two-way traffic. So basically, it should be kind of formed this way. Any case of R is a case of T, right? That is perversion, if we remember. So three very important things we must remember: the inference itself, which is this part, and then the site locatedness or pakshadharmata, which is S has R, right? Which you basically see. That's the first thing you see. Thirdly, what you remember, the general rule, which is any case of R is a case of T, on the basis of which you could infer, right? Now, yeah, so here are examples. I'm not repeating. You can see what is there. So in the case of this hill has fire, since it has smoke, your inference is this hill has fire. Your pakshadharmata is this hill has smoke. And then the provision is any case of smoke is a case of fire. You see, smoke comes first, then fire. This direction is very important. Now, point is, I make a mistake in making an inference only when any of these three claims is contradicted by something. By what? Actually by data. We'll see that. So what I desire no conflict. I desire that there should be no conflict with data. Three of my claims must be uncontradicted by data. This is the main idea. If any one of the claims is contradicted by data which I have, like which I take to be true, correct, if my information contradicts any of the three claims raised by an inference, then the inference is defective, right? This is the basic idea. So here is a rough definition of it. The content of the valid cognition C is the inferential defect of the inference F, if and only if C contradicts any assertion made by F. Now we need to understand it and also try to look at it a little technically, so to say, like, look at and let us unpack it. The content of a valid cognition C, right? Which basically means that your cognition must be knowledge, it must be valid, it must be true. Otherwise, it is not a piece of data, right? What is the content of a true cognition or a valid cognition? It must be a fact, right? There is nothing like true fact or false fact. Every fact, by definition, is true, right? But then a cognition, whatever, and if I cognize somewhere, so for example, I cognize a rope as a snake, I mistake. Here, my cognition is not correct because it does not represent a fact, because my cognition here is not like the object it captures, right? It captures a rope, but then it presents a snake. That is the reason it is a yathartha. It is not correct. It is incorrect. It is aprama. But always a correct cognition, a valid cognition presents a fact, right? Very, very important. Now, the valid cognition, there is no smoke on this hill. Suppose this is the correct cognition. That suppose there is no smoke on this hill, whichever hill it is. Now that contradicts the site location of the inference. This hill has fire since it has smoke. Remember the site location? It is locating the reason in the site. So basically it is this hill has smoke. Now it is directly contradicted by a valid cognition. Suppose it's valid. That is, there is a fact. Really, the hill does not have any smoke. Now the fact that the hill does not have any smoke becomes the inferential defect of my inference, right? Now, you make a mistake when any of your inferential claims, as I said, there are three main claims. If any claim is partially or totally contradicted by any true cognition, valid cognition, then you call the content of that valid cognition, that is the corresponding fact, a defect, right? This is very, very important. We need to understand it. So this is unlike what you see in Western logic or anywhere. In Western logic, a fallacy is it's a defect. In our case, a fallacy is a defect of an inference, but actually it's a fact. Look at it. In itself, it is perfect, right? But then from the perspective of an inference, it's a defect. This is one curious thing we must observe here. So now facts are enlisted on a database, right? So basically the Nyayika deals with a model of universe. If it doesn't have a model of the universe, the Nyaya system, if the system does not have a model, kind of a description of the universe, it cannot argue. You need some universe, right? It may be the real universe. It can also be kind of a virtual universe you construct, right, on paper, or a model, a computational model of it. Now let us see a difference between mere facts and the content of a valid cognition. Remember, our concern is the content, that is the Vishaya of a valid cognition. So what is the content? The content of a cognition about an elephant is that very elephant. Does it make sense? So this is what we need to understand. So whatever a cognition represents is its content, right? So always we must understand that always the content of a valid cognition must be a fact. It is out there, right? It is really there. But a fact, a mere fact, means, now look at it. A mere fact need not be my concern. So there are many facts I do not know. There are many facts about some other galaxy I would never see in my life, right? Those facts may not be my fallacies, right? My inferential defects. Which facts are my concern here in this case? Only those which I get to know, right? That is the reason we are not talking about facts. Rather, we are talking about facts in a roundabout way. We are saying that, so in order to be a fallacy, a fact must be captured by a cognition. Unless it is captured by a cognition, my own cognition, I would never see it as a defect or a non-defect, whatever, right? So the first thing is it must enter, a fact must enter my knowledge world, right? Even in order to be, it may be correct, it may be incorrect, but in every case, first, a fact has to enter my knowledge world. So that's the reason we talk about yathartha jnana vishaya. We do not talk about mere facts, mere vastu sthiti, whatever is out there. Now, here is the definition, not the definition. This is one of the three definitions our the founder of the Navya Nyaya school offered. So Gangesh Upadhyaya, as I mentioned, you can read it, but anyways, let us not try to read it technically. I give you a rough translation of it, and we just talk about it. So the inferential defect is the content of a piece of valid cognition that must be the absentee of an absence, which causes an inferential cognition. Now, this we'll see later if time permits. Basically, it is trying to say that if the content of a cognition, of a valid cognition, blocks your inference, that is, blocks your inference means if the content of a cognition does not allow your inference to be held, to be generated, then you call it a hetvabhasa. Now, how is it? If I know that there is no smoke in a hill, I will never infer that this hill has fire since it has smoke, right? Because I know here the fact that smoke is absent from this hill blocks my inference. This hill has fire since it has got smoke, right? How do I infer? Because I'm convinced there is no smoke in it. So therefore, I cannot move on. It blocks. It becomes a pratibandhaka. Now, how the pratibandhaka is the absentee of an absence which causes an inferential cognition is a different question. If we have time, we get back to that. We just move on with the idea that if a piece of cognition, valid cognition, blocks an inference, right, causes a stoppage to an inference, then we call it, not the cognition, but its content then will be our fallacy or our inferential defect. Now, how to understand it? So you go somewhere and you know that every case of so now let us reconstruct the story. Let us kind of tell the story in a different way. You have observed that, now look at it, you have observed here that any case of fire is a case of smoke, right? So there are two cases of fire and each one actually is a case of smoke, right? From that, you somehow cognize that you get to know, not that you get to know, I would say that you just think that any case of fire is a case of smoke. And then you see fire in that hell. And then you infer that therefore the hell must have smoke. So, like something like this hill has smoke since it has fire. Now, this is a bad inference. Why so? It is because what is the vyapti of it? The provision of it is the underlying provision. You see fire first, you remember, fire comes first. Anything having fire has got smoke, but that is not true. So the provision claim is anything having fire has smoke, but then we know that it is not true because a red hot iron ball is evidence against that, right? So now this red hot iron, so the very absence of smoke from the red hot iron ball itself becomes the fallacy. It is not the knowledge that a red hot iron ball has fire without having smoke. It is the very absence of smoke in a red hot iron ball, which is called the fallacy, right? In this case. So now this is called vyabhichara. We'll just look at it and we'll just talk about it. Now, after this, we'll see a model and we'll talk about defects. Already I mentioned that without a model, we can't do it. So the model is here. Now, suppose you are an entomologist, you talk about insects, you study insects. So, and then here are the things. I have these facts. Eta has wings. It is not true that any case of having wings. Just a second. Having wings is a case of being an insect, and you can read. We will just see it. Now, I thank Shruti Bhatt for compiling information on insects. Now, we will look at real examples of hetvabhasas or fallacies. The first one is deviation or vyabhichara. It's a defect that challenges the provision claim of an inference. Now, suppose I infer Eta is an insect. Remember Eta? Have you watched Bug's Life? If you have, then you have seen her, Princess Eta. So suppose I infer Eta is an insect since she has wings. Now, what is the provision claim? It is anything that has wings. You see, wings comes first. Anything that has wings is an insect, but that's not true. Why? Because a sparrow is evidence against it. A sparrow has got wings, although it is not an insect. And also we have this rule on our database, right? You see S2, the second sentence. It is not true that any case of having wings is a case of being an insect. A sparrow, which is not an insect, has got wings. So the real absence now of insecthood, or the property of being an insect in things that have wings, many things that have wings, right? Like a sparrow, will be the defect of my inference. Eta is an insect since she has wings, right? And then we go to the second, which is Swarupa Siddhi, the unestablished reason. This defect attacks or kind of it targets the site locatedness. Now, what is site locatedness? It is the location of the reason in the site. Now, let us look at this inference. Heimlich can fly since it has wings. Now, we know from our database that a caterpillar does not have wings. Heimlich is a caterpillar, which basically implies that Heimlich does not have wings, right? But you are saying Heimlich can fly since it has wings. You are trying to establish wings as a reason in Heimlich, is the site of it. But the real absence of wings Hamlich has is the unestablished reason for this inference, the particular inference we are talking about. Similarly, so you can see that on the database. I'll repeat the database every time. What is badha or opposition? When a defect targets the inference itself. Remember the inference itself? Suppose you say that S has T since R. In this case, S has T itself is the inference. Now, Heimlich has wings, for example, you infer. And the reason I'm not mentioning Heimlich has wings since Heimlich has X, it doesn't matter. Point is, Heimlich does not have wings, right? You know that. And therefore, that directly kind of contradicts my inference. And so here, once again, the absence of wings Hamlich has is the opposition, right? The opposition fallacy, or the opposition hitwabhasa. Finally, not finally, but well. So once again, the database. Another one, so this is perhaps the last one today we talk about. This is Ashraya Siddhi. Even a partial contradiction may be associated with the fallacy. Now, how? For example, we know that there is no golden ant. It is there on our database, but you somehow infer a golden ant has exactly 6 jointed legs because each ant has exactly 6 jointed legs. So you just infer a golden ant has exactly 6 jointed legs. Now here, it is not about a golden ant not having exactly 6 jointed legs, but it is about not seeing any golden ant anywhere, right? The ashraya, the very locus of the inference is basically unestablished, right? Therefore, you call it unestablished site. So it is a partial contradiction. Even that makes it invalid. Now, this is how, so as you see, so there is a kind of difficult fallacy called Satpratipaksha. I wanted to talk about it, but it will take time. So perhaps we do it some other day. We skip a few things. We go to something else called Tarka. We just spend 2-3 minutes to see what it is, and then it'll get over. Now, so now inferential defects are this, but there is something else that also help us know the right thing. So what do the pramanas do? Say perception, inference, analogy, or testimony. They cut pieces of the reality and present those to us, right? So this is cutting, this very cutting or paricheda is the job of a pramana, of an epistemic tool. Sometimes an epistemic tool or several epistemic tools provide me with several options, and I do not know which one is correct. In that case, a tarka comes to save me. It works at kind of an arbitrator. We'll talk about a few basic tarkas. Now, how it happens? It happens because perhaps intelligence, one feature of intelligence is it is born with a list of preferences. So some of the things are ishta, we desire, cognitively desire. These are not ordinary desires, universally desired things. And some of the things we do not desire. For example, consistency is a thing we desire, right? Economy, inconsistency or virodha is something nobody wants. Economy, laghava, everybody desires. Acceptance of the default value in the absence of counter evidence. Everybody would kind of like it. Stoppage of a process. You see that a process stops somewhere. A process actually takes place. Then you want your theory also to stop somewhere, right? Not to have any infinite regress. So infinite regress is not something I would like, right? On the other hand, these are the anishtas, undesired elements, universally undesired elements, inconsistency, virodha, I don't want it. Profligacy, gaurava, or non-acceptance of the default value in absence of counter evidence, non-stoppage of a process. So that is basically anavastha. Nobody wants these things. Now, I already told about tarka, and then we just start with with one very important tarka. We use it every time especially while doing logic and mathematics. Say prasanga tarka. Here's my favorite example from Euclid's Elements. Suppose you have a question. Does the largest prime exist? So there are two options. It does, it doesn't. I don't know which option is correct. How do I argue? A tarka comes to save me. I start by assuming the largest prime exists. Let it be L. So this is Euclid's proof once again. Now construction, I just construct P a number. How do I do it? I multiply all primes smaller than L. 2 multiplied by 3, by 5, by 7, by 11, all that. And then L. And I add 1 to it. Now, can you see that P is a prime? This big number is a prime. Since you divide it by any prime, you get this remainder 1, right? Therefore, P is a prime because nothing divides it properly except the number itself, except P and 1. And also it is larger than L because L is just a tiny part of it, right? So it must be much, much bigger than L. Therefore, our assumption must be wrong because we assume that L was the largest prime. Here is a prime, P, which is larger than L. Therefore, there is no largest prime, right? You deny your own assumption. This is called prasanga tarka. You begin by assuming something and you come up with inconsistency, virodha, right? Inconsistency is this. On the one hand, you are saying that L is the largest prime, but then you get a prime larger than L, which is virodha. So then you deny what you assumed first, right? So the infinite regress, for example, you said that in order to apprehend a cognition, one needs another cognition, right? This is not correct because had this been the case, we would never finish apprehending an object, right? Because in order to apprehend it, there would be one cognition. In order to apprehend that, another, and the process would go on forever ad infinitum. We don't like it. So on the basis of that, we kind of reject this theory. So this is by this anavastha tarka, economy profligacy. You could somehow cognize that all young humans are mortal and all middle-aged humans are mortal and all old humans are mortal. But you see, it is a big thing. You don't want it. You can, on the other hand, just have all humans are mortal. Look at it. Although the first one is true, A is true, we would prefer B to A because it is smaller, right? This is called Laghava Gaurava Tarka. I'm not getting into other tarkas. Let us see how it finally works. What is the big narrative? Now, you see the processing of data and data itself, right? So suppose you get a cognition like, any case of smoke is a case of fire, right? It enters your processing area, and then you find another one, which is this hill has smoke. They get processed, and you get, therefore, this hill has fire. Now, suppose there is something, say K5, it is on your database, which has already told you that this hill does not have fire. It directly contradicts this data, right? This piece of data. If that is the case, the gate, gets blocked, right? So how the Hetwabhasa works. It does not allow this piece of cognition, that is, this hell has fire, from entering my knowledge area, right? I will not keep this in the storehouse of knowledge because I don't accept it. So a gate is blocked, right? This is the whole idea. Now, had it been, unblocked, it would have entered my knowledge area, and it would have kind of enriched my knowledge area. So now, also on the other hand, so this is how the processing happens. And suppose two pieces of data come through whatever epistemic instrument, and there is some problem. I don't find it, I do not know which one. They contradict each other. I do not know which one is correct, which piece of data. Then I would kind of evaluate it by tarka, whichever tarka, prasanga tarka, or anavastha tarka, or laghava gaurava tarka, or utsarga apavada tarka, whichever. And then the bad one will be rejected by my tarka, and the good one will be accepted. That will now data generation is not tarka's work, right? This is very, very important. That is done by pramana, but tarka just evaluates it, right? So finally, this is how we know things. And this is a rough picture about how we know things and how we kind of, how we enrich our knowledge. So thank you very much. Now, Srini, over to you.
Um, Thank you very much, Nirmalya. Thank you very much, Nirmalya. I know it's a very complicated topic, yet there were around 35 people. I mean, 25 people watching online in Zoom and YouTube, and then around 10 people here. So I open the flow for the discussions. Those who have questions, they can either drop in Zoom or in YouTube chat, or the students who are present here, the philosophy students, if they would like to ask some questions, they are welcome. Let me check. Laura, you have? Yeah.
Sir, if I could get a glimpse of any historical debate, like a small glimpse, like how a Vadi and Prativadi debate, and how he defeated the other one.
Okay, there is one asking this question. I hope you heard, Nirmalya, that the how this debate actually happened is one question that's here. If you would like to answer that question.
Yeah. So as I mentioned in the beginning, so suppose as the proponent, I make an inference, right? And while doing that, as I said, that ostension is not possible, right? I cannot ostensively show that, well, this thing has this property, right? Because it's a debate. It's not the field, right? So then my opponent, if I make a mistake while saying that, an opponent would say, look, you cannot say what you are saying is wrong simply because it has got these defects, whichever defect it is, right? That is one. Second, I make something which has got a hidden contradiction, right? Or which has got some undesired element, right? Somewhere say anavastha or gaurava, things your intellect will not accept as. So then what will happen as the opponent, once again, he would say, I do not accept what you say because what you say, your argument has got, it has got an element which my tarka doesn't approve, right? So these are two ways you can find faults with my argument. As I said, look at the blockage based system. If my argument does not have any such defect, then you accept it, right? Otherwise you reject it. So the rules of rejection are more foundational for the Indian logician than the rules of acceptance, right? So and a non-rejected or a non-blocked argument is accepted. So this is the whole idea, if it makes sense.
Any glimpse of any real example?
Sorry, example?
Any real example that took place? Like,
yeah, that's what. For example, see, we cannot have any tough example or any complex example because our database will not allow. So, for example, if you look at the database, if we get back to it and whatever, so yeah, so look at it. So this is your database. As I said, you are an entomologist and you are talking about insects, right? So you say that, so now say, take this thing, an insect, eta, right? An ant. It must be an insect since it has jointed legs, for example, you say. Now, this is a bad argument. Why? Because not that everything having jointed legs are insects. For example, a spider is not an insect, although it has jointed legs, right? So if I ever use an inference like eta must be an insect since it has jointed legs, although it looks right, because yes, it is an insect, eta. It's an ant, right? Its prince is eta. And at the same time, also it has jointed legs, but still the rule I'm actually kind of using it, which is anything having jointed legs has, insecthood or whatever you call it, is not correct, because a spider is evidence against it. So this hitvabhasa or this defect is called vyabhichara. So I suppose I use this argument. What as an opponent will you say? You will say that no, what you are trying to say is not correct, because it suffers from the defect called vyabhichara dosha, right? So this is how a real defect takes place. Or, for example, I say somewhere. So it's a very popular example. See, I don't want to be Srini. I do not want to be kind of politically incorrect. So, for example, if I say Mama Pitamaha Aputraka, so my grandfather did not have any child. Now, you see, what I'm saying cannot be accepted by you, because your mind will not evaluate it. I have virodha, because what I say implies two things. That is, I am a child of my grandfather's child, and my grandfather did not have any child. You see, it has got this virodha, this inconsistency. Therefore, you as an opponent will reject it, right? So therefore, I'm saying that mainly two ways for rejecting what I say, two argumentative ways of rejecting. Either you use the inferential technique by pointing out, by finding some defect, or you find my fault by looking at some tarka, right? In this case, it is virodha tarka. So yeah, something like that. Does it answer the question?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, please. I think there are two people now. Okay, one person is online. Yes, Mr. Ganesh, you may please go ahead.
Hello, thank you, sir, for the very lucid explanation that you have provided for a kind of complex topic that is there. So I was also kind of uh, thinking about this. How should we construe Indian logic if we do not want to simply do some kind of a comparative analysis in some sense? We always tend to compare Indian logic and Western logic and all such kind of thing. So there are multiple questions that Western logic has, say, for example, the existential import or something. So as against that, because Indian logic, specifically the Nyaya tradition, it has a necessary component of Udaharan. Uh, I was thinking that it will completely avoid the problem of existential import that is there in, say, the Western logical tradition. So, what would you comment upon this? That how Indian logic fares in comparison with, say, other forms of logic that are there, formal logic specifically?
Actually, this is a great question, Ganesh. I must thank you for this. Now, I'd tell you my experience when I began as a student. See, I was a linguist, so I kind of learned a bit of Western logic and formal semantics and stuff. I was trying to translate each and every hitvabhasa into some logical fallacy, and that was a terrible mistake, because you don't need to do such things, right? So the comparison is a very natural thing, because in your school, you studied set theory, right? In your school, you studied some form of Aristotelian logic or something like that, or a little bit of formal logic, Boolean algebra, and stuff like that. How can you avoid the comparison, right? You would somehow compare. But then slowly you learn. So this is from my life experience. Slowly you learn that comparison doesn't take you anywhere. And Indian logic has its own way of doing it. We must understand that there is actually, the Indian system or the Nyaya system is not a logical system. It is rather a semantic system. Why? Because you need a model, right? There is no abstract reasoning in it. Every argument is a real argument, right? You can present it schematically, but finally it doesn't help, because What contradicts it? You don't know, right? So you actually need a database to agree or disagree with your argument, right? If your database completely agrees with your argument, then it is accepted, and it is kind of rejected otherwise, right? Look at it. So you need a database, you need a model. So if you want to construct anything, a machine, actually we were doing that when I was doing my PhD in Lancaster. I was working with computer science people, and I and my supervisor both, and we were trying to come up with a real system, actually a security system that would be using the laws of Nyaya. You see, it is doable. Why? Because this blockage, right? The blocker, the moment you find a difference, the moment you find a conflict, you close the door, right? You close the door. Now look at the beauty of it. So this closing door option must be provided within your model. You teach your system, your machine, how to close doors when there is a conflict, right? So now, so you do two things by doing it. One, if you keep your system, your knowledge area uncontaminated, one, and you also enrich it, right? So I think this is how we have to think very independently. The comparison is, in a sense, it will happen, but then you also come out of it and you establish it. You just look at it as a system, and you actually come up with a machine which will support your claims this way. In fact, we were close to it, but then because we involved too many people, not we, means, well, the computer science department, a lot of foreigners and British forensic, and also, this Air Force security, the government did not take it very nicely. We didn't get fund for it, but actually we saw that we were very close to it, at least theoretically. Can you understand, Ganesh, what I'm trying to say? But in India, unfortunately,
Yes.
no such effort is taking place. No such effort is taking place anywhere. Even at IITs, they talk about Indian knowledge system, but they actually do not take it seriously. If they took it seriously, they would have actually made a machine on the basis of the Nyaya rules. That is not happening anywhere. So my suggestion is, all these people who are interested in our knowledge system, should come up with some kind of a real machine in the sense learning machine, and see how the system works. So I think then we will appreciate Nyaya, not otherwise.
A real world application is required in some sense, like computer science has machine learning and all.
Exactly. That's what I'm saying, that machine learning, because otherwise, how do you test? Because it's a semantic system, right? It is not just a mathematical system where you have abstract entities and formal kind of proof and all that stuff, right? There is no such thing. Your arguments are real arguments. How you establish it if you don't have a model? You don't have any checker, right? You need a checker, which is your model. That is the reason you need a machine to see how it works. And also the real world is too complex a system, right? You cannot handle the real world. That is the reason, restrict it, have a very, very small database, and see how the system works. And it has no Western kind of element, as I was trying to show all the time. It is purely it is pure Nyaya, and it can be done.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks.
Would you like to? Yes, please.
I had a question, but you kind of just answered it in your previous answer. So I was going to ask about the application of these Nyaya principles that we can practically use on a daily basis. But so to rephrase the question, do I understand correctly that this is more for what you call an uncontaminated knowledge area, and that you cannot use it to handle the real world, but it's more for as in a system where you know that the facts are all correct and true.
Srini, can you just, I could hear a few things, but rest of it I couldn't. Can you please kind of summarize the question and tell me?
So she's Laura. Laura is asking that though she wanted to ask this question, you kind of summarized the question, responded to the question earlier, but once again, I lost.
He said that it cannot handle the real world. So does it mean that there aren't any principles that we can use like in real world, and it is meant for such like computer systems and strict like formal debates on it?
Okay. Did you hear this the second time? No.
No, Srini, not at all. Because yeah.
Okay. So you said that it cannot handle the real world scenario. So isn't there a real world application for the Nyaya systems? Am I correct in
Aha.
Okay. So that's our question in summary.
I see. See, once again, Laura, I think I kind of began answering your question in the previous answer. See, what I said is not that Nyaya cannot handle the real world scenario. My point is in the beginning, at the testing phase, because that was our experience, the model you create will not be, able to handle so much of data, right? The multiplicity of data. That is the reason it is like the laboratory situation. You need to restrict your database and see how it works. And then you can enrich it. Slowly, it can be the real world scenario. So, but then it will take some time. So it is only about the testing phase. But ideally, potentially, it should definitely handle the real world scenario. And what I didn't show is this counterbalance Hitwabhasa, Sat Pratipaksha, which is a real tool for managing conflicts and data inconsistency. So the Nyaya system, I'm sorry I didn't show it, but just I cannot help introducing it here. See, the Nyayikas knew that there would be inconsistency in our knowledge. Then they gave a technique for managing inconsistent data without rejecting those, because even inconsistent data is useful in separation. But when too many pieces of data come together, we have trouble, right? So how to keep that on the bay, right? So they had a technique for that also. So that's why I'm saying that actually it can very well handle the real world situation, but perhaps we need to do it in phases, right? So first a small system, bigger database, bigger than that, and slowly a real huge database. I think it will definitely be able to handle that. Thank you.
Nirmalya, I think I would like to ask one simple question. Is that for a learner, for those who are getting introduced to Nyaya system, and if they have any Western orientation already, in that sense, the way you proposed also might translate for them in this sense. So would it be correct to understand in this particular aspect is that whereas the Western deductive reasoning mechanism could be also is seen as a ontology free, the a priori knowledge system is also ontology free, whereas in case of Indian traditions, they are not ontology free. So am I right in translating or summarizing your point of view?
Absolutely important point. I think this is one of the central things as far as the comparative studies concerned. Now, Srini, my feeling is even we have kind of an ontology free attitude. So it depends on which model you have used as an Nayayika. It doesn't matter. You could have used anything. That is the reason I took the entomological model, right? It could be as well, it could also very well be ontology free. That's what I'm saying. But if there is an inconsistency somewhere, Sat Pratipaksha will come to rescue, right, Srini? That's what I'm saying. So the conflict management is the work of Tarkas and the Sat Pratipaksha Hitvabhasa, right? So that's what, because Tarkas are there, even if there is some kind of problem, some kind of so-called ontological problem understood by epistemology or the epistemic subject, we can handle it, isn't it? So my feeling is we are not really kind of ontologically bound, because we could also be ontology free, isn't it? Because you apply it to even paraconsistent logic or something like that. it will be absolutely fine because tarkas are there, right? So, so this is my answer. I hope you see my point, right, Srini, that we don't mind being ontology free. That's what I was trying to say.
But also in another perspective is that even the Western logic, particularly the deductive reasoning, even if it is ontology free in a formal sense, but at the same time that to demonstrate it, you even in a formal structural sense, you might use some part of even if you are using alphabet to speak, it's very structural in nature. Then also that structure itself ontology. The language itself is an ontology. Am I right?
Of course, Srini. And more than that, it means that's the direction I would take, Srini. Not just that, look at it. What is truth preservation? How is the logical deduction truth preserving? It is because the premises are true. The conclusion must be true. So I guarantee, if you use my method, I guarantee as a Western logician that if you use my methods, then your conclusion must be true, provided your premises are true. Is not it ontological to a very great extent? The entire business of truth preservation in Western logic, isn't it ontological in that sense? But yet it is formal. Why is it formal? Because the logic itself can be described without having any ontology. That way, even, I was also trying to show that even Nyaya can be shown completely, in a manner which is ontology free. Now, it is married to some ontology. That's a different question, right? That is the ontology of the Vaisheshika or whatever, right? But it doesn't matter. It could also marry the ontology of the Advaitin or any other ontology, right? Because that is the reason the Advaitins used it, the Mimamsakas used it. It's basically the same system, right? It doesn't matter which ontology you subscribe to, but the logical methods are important. That we could achieve because we also have some kind of formal character. Because we also discussed in terms of sadhya, hetu, paksha, vyapti, pakshadharmata, and paramarsha and stuff, right? That is, now, if you can actually have an entire nyaya just by using sadhya, paksha, hetu, paramarsha, whatever, ashraya, siddhi, and all the technical terms, and have no real parvata or dhuma or vahani. You could do the entire nyaya without doing that, right? Look at Navya Nyaya, look at Gadadhara, look at his lines, right? You don't find any hetu, you don't find any dhuma or any vahani at all in those, right? So my point is, we could very well have a purely formal logic. But then, point is, it's a semantic system. It does not work in the world void of ontology. So it can be married, right? It can be wedded to any ontology. That's my point.
So in the not exactly Western sense, but in the structural sense, it is not the Manasiddhi is not Meyadina. So it's ontological.
Exactly.
But at the same time, it is also ontological because it also has a real world application.
Exactly. So the answer is actually yes and no. And that's a very convenient answer. It is yes, because it can be kind of associated with any ontology, and no, because it can also operate without any ontology, right?
Tattva-Chintamani is a good example for it being formal, purely formal in that sense.
Absolutely. See, the moment you say that pratiyogya samanadhikarana, what is pratiyogi? He never tells what that pratiyogi is, isn't it? And he doesn't even use sadhya or hetu. Jagadisha does that. Gadadhar does. Gangesha himself never says, isn't it? He says that pratiyogya yat samanadhikarana. He uses variables. Look at the formal nature of the definitions of money, isn't it? They use variable. They do not use kind of real things, mostly, right? The definitions. So that is the formal nature of Nyaya, especially Navya Nyaya.
Thank you, Nirmalya, for presenting the most complicated. Some of the students here, they do study Nyaya epistemology and Vedanta epistemology in the first 2 semesters through the texts like Tarka Sangraha, Vedanta Paribhasha, Pramana Paddhati, and so on. And then they are doing the basics of Shabda Bodha. So they are doing actually studying Dharma Dharmi Bhava, Adhara Adeya Bhava, Nirupi Nirupaka Bhava, how they function. So this your lecture has already almost summarized the 2-semester content in a very the most complicated topic, Anumana. You have presented as a part of orientation day. You have presented it for them to take it forward. So that would be for the newcomers. It's a direction. For the people who are already doing it, for them it is almost recapping their past 2 semesters. So thank you so much for accepting our invitation and being here and delivering this lecture. And also it's now on YouTube, so those who want to go back to it and then refer to the lecture, because these topics in my Gurukula, we studied these topics for consecutively 3 to 5 years to get orientation. So it cannot be just done in 1 hour. So thank you for being here, and thanks to all those who have been listening for this 1.5 hour. I think it exceeded the time limit, but it was quite interesting to listen to Nirmalya after so long. And some of my colleagues here, Gautam, Arjuna, and others are also here. Thanks to everyone. And we now conclude the session now, and then gather once again later. Thank you so much, Nirmalya.
Thanks a lot, Srini.
Nice listening to you.